Chit Chat is sponsored by Fun Again Games, where everyone is welcome at our table, and your source for hard-to-find imports, liquidation games, new releases, and much more. Be sure to visit funagain.com to check it out. It's episode 115 of Chit Chat, and this one's a doozy. We debate abstracts. What are they? How do you define them? Who cares? Well, I guess we do, but one thing we all agree on is that we have some games to talk about. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is episode 115, and we are going to talk, and get ready for this, about abstract games. Now, before we get into that, we have some other things to deal with, but I'm just going to tell you.
Some things to deal with.
The gloves are off. The gloves are off.
The gloves are, we've had a day. We've played some games.
Yeah.
We haven't recorded anything quite yet, but we are recording this right now. But we had a longer than needed conversation about abstract games when we talked about whether we're going to talk this on Chit Chat. So what happened is we kind of got derailed into what is an abstract game. We will talk about that a little bit. But we're going to focus on what we would characterize, can we all agree on, pure abstracts in terms of the games that we
could
want
start there.
Why are you trying to say what a pure? Why are you trying to tell? Why are you trying to be?
They're trying to torture
right
me.
now, you're trying to put words in everybody's mouth now.
Listen,
Everybody can agree. That's not what we agreed on.
I think
I'm
we start
regretting
there.
my
This show is
decisions.
about abstracts. We don't have to make it all these defined terms. Could you please start?
I think as we talk about that, because we're gonna do a giveaway, and we'll talk about what even like spawned this conversation.
Sure.
But I think starting with pure abstract, and then kind of talking about what makes
What is less pure?
what is less pure, what is a pure, and talking about some games that we think might toe the line, and we want some input from you as well.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for this whole episode.
Yeah.
And if you're in the live comments below, there's going to be some questions
It's
asked.
going to get spicy.
I
want
expect
you to weigh in.
people to. I'm sorry if this is not your type of games. Trust me, I think this discussion is going to be a little bit more than you expected because we've had a lot of discussion.
Yeah, if you think, I don't like abstract games, wait a minute.
I don't think
because
you-
What is
we've got
abstract?
people on the panel here that'll tell you love abstract games.
Your favorite game is an abstract.
Yeah.
Well, so what spawned this conversation is we got a couple new games. I mean,
We
David,
did.
you're a huge Quarto fan.
I'm
to
a
begin
huge
with.
Quarto fan, and if you've ever played a Gigamic, is the correct pronunciation, by the way. Gigamic, not Gigamic. Gigamic makes all these sorts of games like this. Quarto is my favorite.
What was your favorite?
It might still be my favorite, but I got to tell you, Qawale, is giving it a run for money because
It's pretty good.
Dave was a trader.
it's a
But
lot.
Quarto was great.
It's a lot of fun. Quarto is a little more thinky
Yeah.
and a little quieter game. This one has a lot of really sort of great feedback as you play it because there's a lot more motion.
Yeah.
Kind of brings in that feeling of like when you move on a checkerboard, you go.
Yeah.
You're doing that. It's kind of a Mancala mechanism. And speaking of that game,
Yeah.
thank you for the segue.
You're welcome.
We are giving away a copy of that tonight. So make sure and email us at mvmcontest@gmail.com. Oh boy, with the code word.
Abstract.
Bet you didn't see that one coming. Actually, the code word is abstract.
Question
mark.
Abstract with a question
If
mark.
you
sums
don't
up
have
our
the
day.
question mark,
You don't have
which
a
is right
question mark,
down
you
here,
can't win.
You're not entered to win.
Can't win.
That's a good
Abstract?
That's a good question.
Abstract?
So do that. Email us with that in the subject line for your chance to win Qawale. Now, please be kind. Let's talk about abstracts.
Let's do it because I don't think any of us, first of all, as like a starting point,
Yes.
I don't think any of us would disagree that games like Qawale and Quarto
Yeah.
are what you would like the most pure abstract.
Yes,
games.
and thank you.
Zero
That was
theme.
episode 115 of Chit Chat.
No, I think we'd all agree there. Like zero theme, right? Light mechanics, 2-player head-to-head game where one player wins only by conquering the other player. Like that, I think is like the purest form of abstract you can get.
I think it is the purest traditional definition. It's the definition I had in my head when I suggested this topic of what an abstract is. With that said, we started talking about abstraction and games that have abstract elements. But let's, for the moment, and we'll get to that, let's talk about some of our favorite games of this ilk. Jeremy, do you want to start with Quarto? I mean, I love it too, but what makes you love it so much?
So I love that Quarto is one of those games. It's like a low rules game, just low rules game. It's a conversational game. It's a conversation starter, and it it's one of those ways to introduce people to just a game. Like, let's just play a game. You know, like we have a whole bunch of games in these beautiful boxes with all this artwork, and we think dinosaurs will work with one person, and you know, princesses will work with another, and war will work with another. Qawale just says, hey, I'm going to give you this piece. Do this.
Yeah.
And then we'll create this 5-minute to 10-minute relationship, this game that we play. And to me, it feels almost as, you know, the same as going outside and playing Foursquare. It's like, this is the rule. Like, I just throw this ball at you, you're supposed to catch it. Or I spin the ball and you're supposed to catch it. It's the same idea.
You play Foursquare?
It's very,
you know, I've never played.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, it's kind of like a quick, low rules thing, quick interaction, and there's no stakes other than like, this is my one condition, I'm good. And I love that. I never get tired of it. It's one of the games I highly recommend just to have sitting out, and people will ask you about it, and that's when you play.
100%. I mean, I agree. I love the game. The one thing I would add to that myself is that I think Qawale has a thing like a lot of good abstracts do, and it's that people can relate to it in that everything I always say when I teach Qawale for the first time, I say, don't run away, but it's like tic-tac-toe on steroids.
Yeah.
And people are like, tic-tac-toe. But then they stay in because they know tic-tac-toe.
Right.
Yes.
Like they can,
easy to pick
so
up
we're
on.
getting 4 in a row.
Yeah.
So that's really all you need to know. But then there's a little twist, and people go, "Oh, that's interesting." And it is such an infinitely better game, of course, than tic-tac-toe.
Sure.
But I think at its basic level, it kind of, you can relate it to, you know, a game we played as children, which is clearly a very abstract game. I think we could all agree tic-tac-toe is an abstract game.
Or Connect 4 even, right?
Yes,
like Connect 4
Connect
is an
4.
easy one too, and then that gets people in really easily because a lot of abstracts have pretty easy rule sets, right? And that gets people in the door, and so then you're playing a game, right? Instead of like, here's a 30-minute teach of how to do this long Euro, it's like, here's the 3 rules, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's play.
you're doing this. When you teach an abstract, you're not typically saying, and then.
Right.
But if that, and then they.
I think Connect 4 is actually a really good example because I know a lot of us grew up. That might be your first abstract experience. Quarto and games like that, and this Qawale, it feels the same kind of way. Just like you get that satisfaction in Connect 4 when you see your opponent's got 3 and you drop that 4th one and you see the look on their face when you block their chain. These are like the grown-up, quote-unquote, version of that experience because you definitely get that feeling in Quarto when your opponent thinks that they just gave you a piece that, you know, and then you put it somewhere they didn't expect and you see that look like, oh, I just blocked your plan. It's a satisfying feeling. I mean, from childhood all the way till now, we still play games for that.
And I would say a good abstract too has strategy in it, right?
Yeah.
You're thinking ahead. You're thinking a few turns to say, like, even in Connect 4, where you're like, okay, if I put this here, they'll probably put theirs there, and then I can plan to do this, and hopefully that gets me to the 4, right? And Qawale reminded me of a game that we played growing up, which was called Domination. I think it was just an old Hasbro game.
Probably.
But you're just like, you're planning to try to like dominate all the different towers. And it's a very similar game, honestly, but I had a lot of fun with it because there's those moments, right, where you get people thinking about different things, and while they're thinking about those other things, you come in from behind, and all of a sudden you're like, I won. All the towers are mine. And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yep, that's it.
That's actually a good point. I don't know that it makes a game abstract, but what you just said is a great element of a good abstract, is where you're like, it's anyone's game.
Yes.
At any moment, and there's that tension that exists where whether you're taking your turn or they're taking their turn, you're, like you said, you're looking and going, oh, are they gonna do that? Are they gonna do that? Oh, excellent. And then something goes different, and like, oh, it didn't work out. So then it just goes on until someone, boom, all of a sudden wins, which is really fun.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna start to steer this conversation a little deeper.
Oh, where he's going.
Oh,
Put a little pressure on you.
little deeper.
Now there's Connect 4.
Yeah.
And then there's a game called Fairy Tale Inn, which is an extension.
Oh,
of
yeah. That was a great game.
So that game has this thing called a theme.
Ooh, what is that?
And that game is also basically Connect 4 with powers. So could we still call that an abstract, or are we, because it has a theme, it's no longer abstract?
Are you asking me? Do I get to start? Do I get to start
We
this
should probably
conversation?
start having that conversation.
I think
because
so.
the theme thing is where I think a lot of us started to get a little
To veer off.
little all over the place here.
It's not necessarily the addition of a theme, before we talk about that game specifically, because there are some games that are abstract, like Shobu, for example, has kind of a theme. It has a
What?
theme to the presentation. It has even like that little rope that you lay out. Like
Well,
it's all
those
very
things are representative of things.
representative of a theme. It's very atmospheric. And then you have games like Onitama, which clearly have a theme that could be anything. But like Fairy Tale Inn, that's when you start to add other mechanics on top of just Connect 4, right? Like those powers and things like that.
It's not just the theme. It's that you have some powers and stuff like that.
Right, you have a theme and powers, but it's still an abstract game.
I agree at its heart. What I was going to say to answer your question is, and this is based off a lot of conversation that we've had today as well, when you start adding theme, I think that kind of starts to make things a little grayer.
Yeah.
You know, people start thinking, oh, well, that's not abstract. But yeah, at its heart, it still is based on abstract mechanics.
Yeah.
And then also, when you add in more mechanisms or more things like the powers.
Right. Or scoring, multiple ways to score.
Yeah, certainly scoring and multiple ways of scoring. Things start to feel, and this is hard to define, I said it earlier, just like a game, but not necessarily in any given bucket. Right. All the way to the point where I've seen some games that kind of feel abstract on one level with so many extra mechanics and mechanisms that it feels like it's turned into a Euro. Right. Like a pretty deep, depthy Euro, but having an abstract core. I wouldn't generally classify those. I would never say, hey, that's one of my favorite abstract games, even though it has abstracted elements.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at all those abstract games, like Korto, like Shobu, like even Onitama, a lot of them are two-player games where your only goal is beat your opponent. And whatever, it's beat them and race them to the thing, outwit them, outsmart them, whatever. It does get a little more complicated, I think, when you start adding in points. Mm-hmm. And you start to think, okay, well, if you've got multiple ways to score now, like the game isn't over just when you beat someone, it's over a set number of rounds maybe or whatever. But then you have games like Azul.
I was going to say, I do think of Azul as my favorite abstract.
And Azul does have points. And Azul is not about necessarily overtaking an opponent. Azul is about building a pattern, kind of like you are in some of these other abstract games. But you are scoring points along the way. You're scoring points at the end. There's a variety of in-game scoring. There's a lot of ways to score points in Azul, but it definitely feels like an abstract. I think in the same way that Fairy Tale Inn still feels like Connect 4, even though you've added in all these other mechanics.
I would agree with that,
but
Azul to me does feel, this is just for me personally, it does feel to me like one of those games that is starting to veer away from...
So slippery slope, David says. He's like, once you get into Azul...
Well, I would say even Queen's Garden, I would say is going into Euro territory. Like
because they've added so much.
The original Azul still feels abstract to me, but when we get to Queen's Garden, where it's like starting to do so many different things, then I'm like,
well, like so I still think it's an abstract. It's an abstract because now we're deciding that abstracts have low amount of rules, and you can still be an abstract, but this Queen's Garden thing, the garden or whatever, doesn't matter to you because you just go like, we're still just trying to put these things together and make points.
Sure, it could be anything.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
It's just
like,
tiles
so
at the end of the day.
Since we can say that statement, that's very much a gamer statement. It could be anything. That's where I go like, but let's all agree still that it is an abstract. And just because it has more rules doesn't make it like, oh, but it's a Euro. No, I almost feel like some Euros can just be, they are abstract. It's just that they find a way to make the mechanics make sense to a theme. That's it. It's still an abstract game though. Like as a whole, it's still an abstract concect.
I feel like simplicity though is a core tenet of an abstract.
I just don't think I don't want to. I want to. Well, with game design evolving, as a whole, I think the definition's open. Don't get me wrong. We have Euros that throw the kitchen sinks, and we don't even know what to define them as. But what I'm saying is there's still like at the bottom, which we try to put down in the 1.0s of BGG and moving up. There's still these games that are a little bit higher on the scale, but they're abstract games. They just are. To me, they just are. And you can tell by how somebody describes it. They'll say like, well, this is Queen's Garden. It virtually has no theme. So it's an abstract. Or they'll say like, oh no, this game is highly thematic. You're building a garden and this is how you build it and whatever.
Yeah, it's
that's that's the weird conversations that I see.
It's definitely, a lot of people do really take the theme
topic
super
like,
hardcore.
Oh, yeah, you're building around this fountain and you're like doing all. I'm like,
I feel if you go down that road though, and I know this is a bit of an exaggeration, but if you really tie that so tightly to the definition of an abstract, then every game can really become an abstract because you could peel the theme away from a lot of things.
Sure.
And Euros are historically well known for being like, it's
Based
farming.
on-
and
we're
it could be
farming.
anything.
Yeah, well, it could be. Well, but sometimes it's a tough line to draw. It's a tough line to draw.
Sure.
And I'll say that because when we were talking about doing this topic, we did a little research. I went to BGG, which I think a lot of us watching, a lot of us agree, is kind of set the definition of what they think certain things are, what they think of an abstract
You can
game.
research it. You can research. We said, hey, what is an abstract?
But
hey, what is that? Yeah.
It surprised me greatly that the number one abstract on BGG is Cascadia. And that's not necessarily a game that I'd want to see stripped of its theme. I think that Cascadia is such a thematic game, the way that they've paired these animals with that Pacific Northwest wilderness. And it doesn't hurt that the game is beautiful to look at. But that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. People in the comments right now,
But they also called it pattern building, really, right?
They did, and it is
that's what
kind
that's
of-
what they were kind of saying that abstracts are. They're really just at the core of it a pattern builder, and I think Cascadia is that. Azul is that. What's the other? Calico is that as well. But I don't know if that's really what I thought of as an abstract. I think I used to think abstract was really just didn't have a theme.
Again, those things, it's
Didn't
not...
have a theme. That's
But
one
that's
of those
not,
things.
yeah.
For me, it's not as much about the theme as it is maybe the addition of the mechanics. And like those things have drafting. Azul has drafting. And I think when the mechanisms of a game, at least for me, when I think of the things that make me like the game as much as I do, and if it's the drafting that I find to be the most relevant mechanism, I start to put it in that bucket instead of abstract. I use basically the main mechanic of a game to sort of define it. And with that said, and I've said this before, I don't like labels in general. It brings
That's
brings
actually
about
where
these
I think the heart of the
conversations.
argument came from.
Yes,
Because David
did.
is so resistant to being in that label.
I do not like
He
cornered
does not
into
like
saying
it
yes,
at
this
all.
is this, and no
Does
one
not
can,
like it
can't be
at
anything
all.
Well,
else.
I think your definition of abstract throughout history does apply to a lot of games, like Mancala. Zero theme. I mean, you're literally you're just moving those pieces. And games like Go, which Go was one of the more popular games
in the world.
I think
it's
it's
across the
time.
world.
I think
Like
it
Go
is.
is a hugely popular game. And then there's like Othello, which is
Yeah.
Kind of
reminiscent.
like Go.
And then we have games like Chess, though, which Chess does actually have a theme.
Yeah, I would say that's a theme.
Right?
She would definitely say it
But
has a theme.
I mean,
No, chess has a theme.
Chess has a theme.
It's a theme.
It does.
You're going to war against each other.
guess.
It's
There's
just that
king and
throughout
queen.
time, it's always had those
Same
shaped
pieces.
pieces. Like,
But,
but
then
maybe
not
a
even
better-
just shapes. There's pawns and knights.
that's what I'm
and
saying. The
rooks.
name of the pieces, they all
Keys.
have their abilities, their moving patterns.
If it came out new today and it was like well-made pieces, right, that looked like those things, and you're like, this is the king, this is the queen, you wouldn't say it doesn't have a theme.
So-
You'd be like, oh, that's
so
what the theme is.
we'll piggyback that. Folks, what do you think about War Chest? So War Chest is the same idea, except you just have this bag, but you have these bags of different types of warriors. Same thing as chess, in the idea that chip, that character does this certain program or has a certain ability to shoot or whatever. Is that abstract? I mean, just because they don't have figurines and all that stuff like that, is it abstract, or is it, is it something else? And that's where it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to understand, because I really feel now that we are just talking about theme, and theme is the determination of whether it's an abstract.
I don't think
Oh,
it is just as simple
I
as
don't
that.
feel that way at all.
And like that's a really good example, I think, because we talked. David mentioned something being abstracted, like that game taking
Abstracted,
War Chest,
right.
taking the concept of a battle and abstracting it down to moving these poker chips across a board.
Which you do in every game.
Right.
But then there's also games that feel abstract, right? That have abstract elements, like moving those pieces in War Chest feels like playing an abstract game.
Right.
But then you do have other layers on top of that, and
It's kind of an evolved. I think when
evolved
those games started coming
abstract. I
out,
like
people
that.
started. Well, people did regard those as kind of like a modified or evolved abstract game, where like Onitama for sure, and War Chess, where you're like, oh, it's kind of like chess but with powers. Like, and again, if it's kind of like chess but with powers, and you score during 3 phases of the game, and there's a drafting step where you do this, then it becomes
No
more of
longer
a
an
game.
abstract,
It's
yeah.
less abstract because there's so many other things going on.
So many different. Would you say that a pure abstract is just one mechanic done really well?
Well, like I said earlier, I do think now that we're talking about it as we're talking about it here, I think simplicity for
It's
me
part of it.
is a big part of the definition. Simplicity means a lot.
Okay, we didn't talk about this. So like card games.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are all card games essentially
abstract
abstract?
game?
I thought about this earlier, but
'Cause
I
like
dared not bring it
let's
up.
no, I'm
And
serious.
now we
Like,
dare.
Let's argue about every single trick-taking game. All of them.
No, I think all card games are abstract games.
But then there's like
every
Cat in
card.
the Box, which has an actual
No,
theme.
I mean
Well, I'm
every
just saying, like
game that uses
Regicide,
a
like Regicide.
Oh,
52 card normal
Right.
standard deck.
Regicide is a
Abstract.
52. Regicide is literally a card game that you can take a deck of cards out and play the game, or you can buy the game. You can literally buy the game, and you're basically buying a deck of cards.
Both abstract.
So
Why
I
are
just
they abstract though?
I wouldn't generally regard card games as abstract games,
Yeah.
but I do think
I was
those
gonna-
are more abstract than, like, say...
Yeah, but like, so we this also all came up because I brought over Break the Cube, and David was
Yes.
like, "That's not abstract. That's
I
deduction."
mean, I didn't say it just like that.
He was
but
like,
I did,
"Emily, that doesn't even count."
well, that's.
I'm not going to abstract how you said it. No.
That kind of does.
Distracting.
We've been
I
talking
did
about
feel
this
it was
a
more
lot,
deduction.
and I think that people in the comments right now, people watching this video, are going to have their own ideas of
Those
what
of you
makes.
who are still
those
watching
of you
this
who
now.
are
I know.
stuck
Like,
it through.
you're like, guys, it's not that hard.
Their episodes
Well,
are crazy.
And as we're talking, just there's just so many games that defy category, or so many games
Yes.
that are very hard to qualify.
100%.
And I think one thing we wanted to do was bring up a game that we think
Yeah.
might be a little difficult and kind of
Yeah.
see what everyone else thinks, what you guys think in the comments.
And I'm even going
About
to
where
play
it
along.
falls.
And
Yeah, David
come up.
agreed.
I'm bringing a real game that's
Bringing the
edgy.
heat.
I'm not saying is this
Oh,
abstract?
edgy.
Well, no, I
Edgy.
just think it's
An
a
edge
game.
case.
I think
Okay.
it's a good game that people will go, oh, okay, I see there's abstract elements, and I don't want to steer you too well, and I'll start. It's 5 Tribes. 5 Tribes is, I would say personally, a Euro first and foremost, but it has very abstract elements because you're kind of just using a Mancala mechanism where you pick up meeples, drop, drop, drop. But it does have some of those other things that we talked about.
Yeah,
there's set
I think it has a lot of
collection.
mechanics.
There's set
in it.
collection and a lot of mechanics. Well, I'm not defending this. I'm not saying it's an abstract. In fact, I'll say right now, personally, you ask me, not at all an abstract. But I'm putting it forth because I think it falls into the category of a lot of the same games. I mean, someone here brought up Maracaibo earlier today, and I feel like this is more abstracted.
Don't start with Merrick. But I think that's
Okay,
a great.
now why are you bringing that up? Because you want to fight on camera is what he
He
wants
wants
to
to
do.
fight.
You know what? Like that's
Fight.
actually you're lighting me up, bro. You're lighting me up, bro.
I think
Like
that's a
don't
great
bring
example,
that up
though.
on camera. See?
But I think that's like 5
I
Tribes.
actually couldn't remember whether it was you or
We
Ryan.
were talking
You're
about it
lighting
earlier
me up,
because
bro.
some games, a lot of games, 5 Tribes included, have abstract actions. Like Maracaibo simulates a lot of things. You're actually moving a ship from location to location, going to these ports, and then some things are just done abstractly. I mean that's its own thing. And I think 5 Tribes probably has more of that than you would like.
More of what?
More of like those other mechanics that are layered on there. Even if like the way you interact with the Jin that give you special powers. It's done in a very abstract way. The market is done in a very abstract way.
Sure, but I would 100% never say 5 Tribes is an abstract game.
Well, I've got a harder one.
What's that?
Cryptid. Is Cryptid abstract? Is that an abstract game?
I will go last because I have an opinion.
See, but the thing is, I think most deduction games feel like an abstract because at the core, I think deduction feels a little more themeless and like I don't know.
Well, what about like Search for Planet
very
X? That
simple.
feels very thematic.
Sure.
It is absolutely not at
No?
all.
Well, we played
That's
Search for
nothing to-
Lost Species. That was very thematic too.
I don't think any more so than Cryptid. I think the reason you say that about Cryptid is because it has an abstract look to it.
Yeah.
It's like geometric shapes
Sure.
and even the Quanchai Moria artwork makes it feel abstract. And I get that, but this is my point on this, and this is the only one I'll make, is on Cryptid, you hit the nail on the head. That's where the core mechanic feels more like the bucket should be put in. It's a deduction game. Does it have abstract elements? Sure, but it's a deduction game. If we need to label things, I would say.
And you don't think deduction is part of abstracts. You think deduction, abstracts, different
I do-
different buckets.
I do-
They own their own buckets.
But abstract
I do
isn't a-
find when,
isn't a
like-
mechanic.
Because I think like Mastermind to me seems like it would be an abstract game, but it's not. It would definitely fall into deduction,
For
right?
sure. For
Well,
sure.
Mastermind is one of the classic deduction games.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't
That's a
know.
tough
It
one.
just seems as simple in the same way as like chess, right? Like
Agreed, and that's where sort of the core mechanics cloud things up for me, because I feel like it's better. So the way I would put it is, if I worked at a game store and someone said, I like this game, and this game, and it was Clue, Cryptid, and Mastermind, I would not suggest another abstract game. I would suggest a deduction game for
Sure.
that person.
yeah, but they were all deduction games. Like
All those were
Clue is
deduction-
not
No,
abstract.
but that's
though.
what I'm saying is, when I'm considering how people are describing it, or other games you compare them to, if I say compare Cryptid to something, you don't say, well, this, and this, and one of those is not deduction, and it's
I mean, that's
just an
fair.
abstract game.
Deduction is definitely the mechanism that drives Cryptid forward, but Clue is a deduction game as well that is not abstract. You're literally moving into rooms,
Yeah.
gathering information in those rooms, and I think a lot of games, and maybe that's just a pasted theme, maybe that could just be anything.
But it feels more like exploration at that point, right?
It does. It feels more like you're actually thematically moving through.
But are we
a
clear
mansion.
though? Clue is an abstract game or not?
No.
I would
No.
say no. I
No.
would say
Okay.
that it was a deduction game, but I don't know that like I don't know if having drafting makes you not a abstract. I don't know if adding set collection makes you not an abstract, or deduction makes you.
It's
a tough line.
It's also gray, and it's also subjective, and that's why
I'm serious. Like with Cryptid,
Hard
if
to
it
do.
wasn't even, it didn't even have to be named. It could be like find the whatever. Like
Find the hex.
Find the whatever. Find the X.
Find the hex,
Find
yeah.
the X.
Yeah.
It could be
Yeah.
called Find the X. And then you would just be like, all right, so how do you play this game? Okay, so you just look at this chart of like where we put these pieces, and then you have these conditions.
Yeah.
And okay, so we play again. Okay, I'll pick another random setup that they have. Boom. All right, we want to play again. Oh, I got an app. It's got
Yeah.
like 500 of them in there. You know, like it's not an actual. It's literally like to me it is an abstract, and it gets closer to the line where I can say it's iffy. But there's literally that is an abstract to me. It's an abstract game. The mechanic is deduction. That's it.
I'm going to remain quiet, because I don't want this episode to be 3 hours long.
No,
No,
okay.
David's got his
I-
Cryptid
like,
rant ready to
No,
go.
thank you.
I just if again, I just kind of go back to when I relate it to people who are, if you're putting in games in buckets for people, and someone says, I like chess, checkers, and Azul, and this person says, I like these deduction games,
Yeah.
even though Clue's wildly different and more thematic, and those two people need a game, you're going to give this person Cryptid, the deduction person, not the abstract person, because it's the more prevailing definer of the
Okay,
game.
so then I'll give you my example. So you said chess, checkers, and I don't remember what the user
Azul.
was. Stratego is my example.
Oh.
Is Stratego an abstract game? And to me, I would never have really thought of it as an abstract game.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's-
because you
have.
said,
I said it seems like a war game,
and
right?
it is that
It's
too.
PvP. It's literally I have generals and spies and
But
hidden information.
But all you're trying to do is find the flag.
Yep, it's capture the flag.
It's capture the flag, right? Like it's not like you're not even like simulating warfare at all.
Sure.
So that, I mean, it feels more abstract to me in that like those pieces could be anything. All you're really doing is moving a piece, comparing numbers, lower number goes. And yeah, that's like abstracting, simulating like that idea of like war and battle.
So do you think is it abstract to you?
Oh, man, it's a lot closer to the line though.
So risk
For
is
sure.
So risk is not an abstract to you then.
So I consider
Because
risk kind of abstract.
Because risk.
don't think
See, I would
Risk
say
is-
Risk is a war game.
Yeah.
So that's,
It is a
that's,
war game.
So the theme that they told you is war. That's it. That's it. That like everything else is just pushing things from here to there.
Same with every war game.
Well, I'm just saying, but, right? Exactly.
true.
Same
I
with
mean,
every war game.
every
mean,
they're,
it
just,
really
map
is.
game
they're
is
saying,
like
hey,
that.
you are simulating this event.
Risk is definitely a simulation game, and I think that's another great example of where I would say Risk is a game where a lot of what you do in a war game has been abstracted
Abstracted.
down to dice rolls and
This is a perfect
turning
example
in
of,
cards.
of what we were saying, abstracted. So
abstracted
something
versus like a
abstracted.
purely abstract
Right,
game. I think a
abstracted.
pure abstract Risk would be everyone starts with the same amount of troops everywhere, everything is deterministic, and you're making strategic decisions to like
Right.
whittle down your armies, and there's no
Right.
dice rolling.
Sure.
That would be like a more what I would consider pure abstract.
My point was that I think if you said you like chess, you like checkers, I think Stratega would go in that line. I don't think Risk would, right? Like it's not like, and then Risk.
Right.
Try that next 6 hours later.
You're singing my tune now. That's how I'm
Again, I wouldn't consider it, in my book, Stratega was never seen as an abstract game.
Stratego does have a lot of the things we talked about, a lot of things we looked up that like define what an abstract is.
Well, it's also kind of like a poor man's chess.
Right, it's a 1v1. It's 2 players facing off. Your only goal is to beat your opponent.
It's not pattern building.
There's no scoring
There is
involved.
hidden information.
There is hidden information. There is an element of deduction.
There's more rules because it's how different things interact. There is a yes, but if it's
true.
a spy, if it's a 2, if it's a bomb. I don't know.
Again, that would fall into that evolved abstract.
I'm wondering what people in the comments are saying about Stratego right now, because that's why we wanted people to be involved with this one.
Yeah, tell us. Stratega? Abstract?
I'm wondering
Board
if
game?
anyone
Different thing?
cares at all like
I
we
know.
do about this topic.
No. If you're a board gamer,
I was
you
like
care.
leaning into this, and now I'm like, yeah, I think we're maybe losing everybody.
This quickly became a who could beat up who, Superman or Batman type of conversation,
Well,
because it's kind of nonsensical things to be debated.
I want to know what was yours.
Mine
yours
is
Worcester?
Santorini.
Oh, Santorini.
Santorini, which I think is at its core just it is a straight up abstract. The concept of the game is also very simple, and it's really just moving pieces around. Now the powers that they added, that part right there, is it gave it more theme. But just like Fairy Tile in, that's it. But the concept is still this abstract game, no matter how you look at it. I don't think that's up for discussion, but people will probably say, no, it's got more than this and that. And the argument to me is
clearly
that
up for discussion.
it's not. It's not. It's an abstract game.
I would totally agree with you. It falls into the same category as like Onitama in that Onitama feels like chess but with powers, or chess feels that way. Santorini was its own game without those powers, and then they added the theme, which could have really been almost anything. And then those power cards, which made it have that
But with the
Onitama
power cards, I don't think it feels like an abstract anymore. I think it's enough changed.
I
for
feel
sure.
like with
there are
the power
different win
cards,
conditions.
I know, but it just
different
feels like a
things.
new abstract every time.
A new,
Like with new different powers.
with different
That's how I
rules,
feel
like a game of chess where the pieces move differently for both sides.
Like Onitama.
Right.
Like-
If you said, like, that's another thing. It's like if somebody said this is the like this is Santorini, then they're like, okay, now take this deck out of the box. This is called the advanced game. Like, it's still an abstract. The base game is still an abstract. So
Yeah, but if you add 5 mechanics to an abstract, it's now no longer an abstract, right?
No, but if I just say, hey, this guy, this
question.
card right here gives you an extra move. Like, it just gives you one more move. Okay, like we're still in the abstract realm.
Yeah,
here.
but that's not enough.
Okay, but
right?
you get
Their
one
card powers are
You
pretty
get one
juicy.
card that gives you one move. You get the card that goes
know.
1 forward, 1 right. So it's like that's not. You're still in abstract mode.
Look, I never.
The beautiful artwork and stuff do not make it not an abstract.
I
It's
never
still
thought
an
this would be the topic that tore MVM apart.
I mean,
None of us are speaking after today.
you wouldn't have believed, and I'll take full blame
I teach
for
workplace violence classes. This is getting to the de-escalation mode, where people are going to have to come in here and decide the fate of MVM.
Somebody just tell me definitively.
Tell me
Is it
What is not
abstract?
abstract?
I'm typically pretty easygoing. I hope everyone would agree. But boy, this morning when we had this conversation, I was
wrap it up.
absolutely the person that was most livid with this
Well, I
conversation.
definitely think I definitely think you, out of all 4 of us, have the most traditional, purest definition of what is an abstract.
Yeah.
While ironically being, I think, the person who cares least about labeling
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
That's also true.
It
But,
just frustrates me to know.
I mean, I'm very interested. Like, this is an interesting topic for me. Like, I am a person that likes syntax, and I am a person that likes being able to categorize things and call things what they are. And like, we had this conversation before we even started any of this. Was like, my opinion of what abstract means was very different. Like, you're right when you say, really, every single board game is abstract.
But
There's so many grades, and then you do kind of whittle it down, and like, yeah, okay, this is abstracted but simulation, all the way down to like Quarto, to go right back to where we started. You can't whittle a game down, I think, farther than Quarto unless it's tic-tac-toe, right? Like, I think that's like a good. I don't know. Like, that's like nothing. It's like beautiful in its simplicity.
And here's the deal: like it just depends on how deep you want to go, right?
Yeah.
Because someone can say in Mancala, these were the magical beads of so and so. You don't know. I'm sorry, you don't know. You don't know what it was, right?
Yeah.
And in Quarto, it could be like, let me tell you a story about these 4 knights that were to come together, and when they align, like you have no idea like how deep that can go. But my whole
Kind of like Santorini, right?
well, I'm done. I want to fight. No, but I would say that it's also really good that we had these discussions, because it's also one of those types of discussions where even when someone's trying to sell, like when people are at stores trying to sell you a game, or like when we're on our videos trying to explain a game to you, we're trying to find ways to convey these messages very clear without
or relate them to others.
Right, like making them relatable. So sometimes you can't use certain words like, yeah, but it's abstracted. Like you're trying to be respectful to the game.
You just have to be careful.
You're being respectful to the game and what it's trying to do and the theme it's exhibiting, because people put a lot of work into the mechanics of these games, and sometimes people see theme as the breaker of all this stuff. But there's still a lot more that goes into it, and there's the core of the design, which we all agree it all starts with the abstract concept. A lot of publishers like are scrambling to figure out a theme for a game sometimes. You know, like, so this conversation, of course, is all passionate, but you know, I just thought about that. It's like really like we have to work really hard to make sure we say the right things to you, so you understand what kind of decisions you're making when you're back in some of the games that we cover.
Yeah, so hopefully we've used the right words tonight in this episode to communicate. I can't imagine you're walking away feeling like, okay, I know exactly how I feel about abstracts now.
But maybe you never thought twice about what an abstract
That's true.
was. There's so
Maybe
much
you're
gray
like,
area
hey, that
here.
Chit Chat is an educational
Oh
program.
my
as well.
God!
It is. Hey, we educate.
And they're all wrong.
Yeah,
Every
we want to educate you. This is a perfect example. Like, we don't agree on how to educate you either.
No.
There are definitely 4 different teachers with 4 different philosophies on
100%.
Right, yeah.
So let's segue to a less abstract conversation. Some of the games we've been playing, please, dear God, let's not talk about abstracts.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Can I start?
Yes.
Because actually, one thing too that I was thinking about, because we just played Joan of Arc, which is the Orleans roll and write. If you haven't seen our just played, take a look. This is a game that I was super excited about because I love Orleans. Like, that game is so good, and it does so many really satisfying things with bag building, that I was very interested to see how would that game feel when you kind of take that bag building element away and you turn it into like this drafting game. And it actually turned out to be really cool and a really satisfying experience that I think partners really well with Orleans. Like, if you enjoy that game, you're probably really going to like the draw and write, even though it does feel very different. And what I was about to say before I even thought about it that it abstracts a lot of what you're doing. It really does, though. But it takes a lot of what you're doing in Orleans and like turns it into this draw and write, and like a lot of the same actions you'd expect are present. Even a lot of the same strategies that you can use in the board game, you can use in the draw and write as well. And I think for me, coming into that game as an Orleans fan, playing that game countless times, it was super simple to learn, super simple to play. And I mean, while it might not be something that I run to every chance I get, I don't think I would ever turn down a play either.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. It does, and we said this a billion times in the video that we posted, it does a great job of making you feel like you played Orleans. But mechanically, as you're playing it, it's playing like a roll and write.
I just realized that's the tagline. Feel like you played Orleans without having to even play Orleans.
Pretty much. So if you like Orleans, it'll be like, oh, it's been a while since I played it, and this was a nice, easy, quick setup, fast playing game that gave me all the feels. And a lot of people say, well, do I need both? Because we've seen that question in our Discord and in some comments. It depends on what kind of it. If you want to roll and write in your collection and you can have a Euro in collection, yes, I think you can have both of these in there. And they'll both give you the same joy that Orleans does.
Yeah, they're very different games.
Yeah, mechanically.
And honestly, like, the draw and write gives you some of those satisfying roll and write like combos that you're kind of used to seeing, where you check off one box and then go check off this box, and that gives you this. Like, that's not in the board game. So it is kind of neat to have that experience as well.
Yeah.
So check out the video if you want to know more.
Yes, please check out
our
the
Just
video.
Played video. It's a lot of fun.
Right after Chit Chat.
What have you been playing, David?
What have I been playing? Well, I am going to bring up an abstract because we talked about it earlier. We're giving away a copy, and I want to tell you a little bit about Qawale because this has kind of hit the table and become what I think is going to be one of my favorite new pure abstracts. In this game, it has a Mancala aspect too.
Pure plus.
Pure plus.
Pure plus, actually.
You have a color, the other player has a color, you have these tokens, these really nice wooden pieces, honestly, that are off the board, and then in the corners of the board, and the board has what? Is it 4x4?
4x4.
Yeah.
4x4, and in the corners there's a neutral colored stack too. And the whole thing, oh my gosh, please let's not talk about more of this, but thematically,
Sure.
it is based off of those stacking stones, that you see.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to basically be taking one of your pieces on your turn, putting it on any stack on the board. It has to go on at least one other stone of whatever color. And then you pick up the whole stack and you move it orthogonally, dropping the bottom one at a time. And the winner is going to be whoever does that and ends up with 4 of their color on the topmost in a row or column or diagonal. So again, this starts with a description that's kind of like tic-tac-toe on steroids as well. What I think it does better for me than
tic-tac-toe?
Quarto, than Quarto. Like I said earlier, this has a lot more, I think you said it, tactile fun.
Yeah.
Because you're interacting with the board more. You're picking up things that just the act of dropping those things off in Mancala style is just very satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Quarto's satisfying in a very different way. Quarto's is satisfying in I'm holding this piece with it up to my chin thinking sort of way.
That's gross.
And and it's not like, it's fun, but it's not like exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Also,
more tension fun.
Qawale just has these moments like where it's just a beautiful game to look at.
Oh,
Yeah.
it
Like
is.
all these, and
yeah,
like
it really is. It's
the
a really,
baseboard is like really nice, and it has those like stones built in that you
It's
stack
amazing
everything onto.
amazing production.
And you get these big towers, and it's just like, and
It's fun swing too, where you can like do a whole
Oh, it
tower,
is.
and it's like I'm moving 6 things around the board, and this and this and this and this, and
And you can get suckered into that too, because
Yeah.
when there's these
Yeah,
big
just
stacks,
like the good feeling of moving
you
around.
think,
You're like, oh, I'll
I'm
grab
gonna
the big
pick
one.
up this big one and drop a bunch, and surely that will result in something close to a win. And then Emily goes, bloop, bloop, and just wins,
Yeah.
just
Also-
with a tiny little stack.
you mentioned the tactile feel is just so
Yeah.
like those stones
Yeah,
are
they're
so
like
well
smooth
done.
and
Yeah,
they got
it's,
like a smooth content.
it's just like that's like a game I
Yeah.
picture myself playing. Like a babbling brook, like out in
Sure.
a forest clearing, just like stacking these stones. Like it's just a really
But like this,
calming
we
game.
maybe sound like we're sales pitching this, but this game spurred a whole episode and argument.
you go.
It really
that's
is.
that's how good that's how good the game was. The game was that good. We thought of the topic, and then we argued about the topic
Yeah,
for
it's
half
kind
the
of funny
day.
because you
Yeah.
said earlier that you like Quarto. One of the reasons you like Quarto is because it's a conversation starter.
Yeah, that was
This sparked the
It was.
conversation.
It was.
And I actually think, would you agree, this sitting on the table is probably as good, if not more, of a conversation starter, just the way
Yes.
it looks.
Oh,
yes.
You're like, someone looks at this and goes,
what
"Oh,
is this?
tell me what this is."
However, I don't think they can do a giant version of this one, or your towers are going to be like
Oh,
that.
I did. The first time I played
played
it at Essen, it was these
Oh,
big,
they had
big
it-
rocks.
they did
yeah.
with, like,
it
huge
was like
rocks?
this big. Yeah, you put them on there.
That's
Doesn't
epic.
that sound like
That's
fun?
epic.
Yeah,
That
it's
does
awesome.
sound like fun.
Yeah.
I played not an abstract, so I will actually take us off theme, and I played Splendor Duel. So I got
yeah.
that to the
I'm glad
table
you
for the
got to
first few
play that.
times. Yeah. I liked it a lot, and I really enjoyed it. I was someone who didn't like Splendor originally.
me too.
I just felt like it was too easy for someone to get a really good engine going, and then you were like, okay, well, they just have a better engine, so no matter what comes up, they're going to be able to buy it, and I can't really do anything. Sorry. But in the duel, it's a lot more of like that give and take because you're 2 people, right? And with the 3 different win conditions, you can kind of be going for slightly different things and trying to figure out like, okay, I'm going for 20 points. They're only going for 10 in that one color.
Yep.
I can't let them get that one color.
Oh, they got the crowns though.
They get the
got the
crowns.
crowns.
What am I doing now?
Oh, didn't expect that one.
I think the pearl, too,
Oh,
is
yes,
what
adds a
helps
lot.
Oh,
that,
no, I
like,
got the
engine.
crowns, I got the card, and I just took your pearl. Now what's up?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay?
exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So like that can happen. That game, we played it at work again, I think twice this week. It just, wow, what a surprising title.
It absolutely
it was.
What a
I did not
surprising
think
game.
that was a game
It's
that I was
amazing
going to like.
that they were able to take Splendor,
Yeah.
which however many years old it is, and do something that now is becoming what is probably maybe the preferred version of
Oh,
the
yeah.
game.
My
by at
For
least
me,
us.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very surprised.
Like I don't own Splendor, but I'll probably pick up Splendor Duel.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good. Great
Yeah.
2-player game.
That was a really good purchase. Low key, and it came too late in the year. Otherwise, I might have slid it in there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I came pretty late.
I don't know. It came up pretty late. So I just thought about all the games I've been playing lately. I've been playing a lot. I played a lot of 11, and I have so many thoughts on that game. But I'm thinking about this game I just played right before I left to come down here. It's called Encounter Shattered Waste. Now, it's a game that I'm going to be previewing. I'll go into deep detail, but here's like the elevator pitch. It's a little bit of Final Fantasy VII where you're in the fight, like you're in the fight screen where you're like moving front and back and like kind of in lanes and stuff like that. It's kind of Dark Souls because they have like this boss that has like, it can regenerate back to its, it can regenerate into another form. So you fight it and then the bar goes back up and then you got to fight it again. And then it's got this KDM style where the fighting fatigue deck goes back and forth. And then when it gets weak enough, then you can start actually hitting it. And it's got so many different ways to play with that system. It's got kind of a limit break system where you can actually turn to your other side and become this more damaged and more crazed version of yourself. But it has this really interesting core mechanic where you're a magic user, but you can have like a fight card, a magic card, or a whole bunch of item cards. And you get those from a deck, and you can draft which ones you want to build your character with. And what happens is now that you're a warrior, you may have 5 attack cards, 1 help card, and whatever. And you guys are drafting what you want to have and build out your character. So you're not set with, I'm a wind wizard or something like that. Or I'm they have one guy who's like a mathematician warrior or whatever, and that has a combination. And that was the really cool thing that stuck with me, is like that drafting of abilities and items and stuff at the beginning. And as you use those things, you can actually change yourself as you go along. And I was like, wow, this game, I don't know if it'll have a big audience or whatnot, but I really thought it was an interesting game, and I'd love to show you guys. I'd love to show you all.
What's
Very
it called?
Interesting game. It's called Encounter Shattered Waste. So check that out. It's got this kind of 32-bit art, like as if we were playing not Final Fantasy VII, but more like 6, more like 6. And but it's like dark. Like I said, it's like Dark Souls, kind of dark. And all the characters flip and do different things when they turn. It's just a very interesting game, and like I said, I love to show these types of games to you, especially by small publishers, and hopefully it gets some eyes on it so you can see if you can make an informed backing decision.
Sounds pretty abstract.
Yeah, it does.
It sounds nothing but abstract, or everything but abstract.
I'm surprised nobody mentioned this as well. I want to point out, a few days ago, as of when you're watching this, we actually did something new, and we live streamed Alhambra, which is an older classic game.
At least a few days ago.
A few days ago. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, we did it. We put it today as of filming. Something I think we'd probably like to do more of whenever Jeremy happens to pop by. It was a lot of fun. We had a great time doing it.
I don't think we've ever one other time we decided.
One other time, and it was epic, buddy.
And it was epic. But yeah, the 4 of us huddled around, smashed around a table playing Alhambra, which was a really interesting experience because 3 of us had never played it. Emily had.
I had?
I think, is it fair to say, I'm going to put you on the spot, did your impression of the game, because you didn't like the original game, but we played with a couple things, did it go up?
It definitely went up. Yeah, I think with the modules we chose, it went up. And I think
she won, too. But
that helped. But the characters, the unique character powers, I think definitely make that game much better than its base version.
There are modules upon modules in the big box. There's 26 modules in there, and we use just 2 of them. Yeah. So check that out. Anyways, that is episode 115 of Chit Chat. I hope you enjoyed it. Because we certainly did not. No, we did. It was a fun-spirited conversation. We'll try to have more of those. Let us know what you think about abstracts down below.
And
what are your favorites?
I'll let the 3 of them answer the comments.
Come to the Discord where we're going to be probably continuing this conversation
I think
after the fact.
I think there will be shots at BGG. I think there will be shots at the games we talked about. Don't worry. We'll respond to you in the comments because I think this is a good conversation to have.
Yeah, but of course, until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.